Hey, folks, welcome back. This is Mark Devine with the Unbeatable Mind podcast. Super stoked to have you here. Really appreciate your time and your focus and your commitment to Unbeatable Mind. And today's guest is going to be fantastic. We have Dean Karnazes on and with us. I'll tell you a little bit more about Dean in a moment and we'll get going. But before I do, you know the deal. We are now available on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and also our website. So we'd love for you to leave us a review on one of those places. And if you want to get on our email list to find out about all the cool things that we do, then go to unbeatablemind.com/podcast. And all sorts of cool things going on. So I won't get into all the things going on here at HQ down in Encinitas, where we're moving to Carlsbad in the next month. Wow. But we'll talk about that some other time because we got a lot to talk about with Dean. Now, Dean has been named by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. That is freaking cool. I want to figure out how to do that. Men's Fitness said he was one of the fittest men on the planet. Dean's an ultra runner. Like, this guy doesn't stop. He just told me he doesn't even own a car, which would force him to run many places. He's competed in some of the toughest endurance events on the planet. But Dean, of course, is more than just a crazy runner. He's a best-selling author, a business guy, and a philanthropist. So, Dean, welcome. Dean Karnazes, thanks so much for your time today. Super stoked to have you here.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I hope I can live up to that very lofty introduction.
I know. I feel the same way when people introduce me. I'm like, really? Okay, let's go. But yeah, so I scanned through your book. Because my friend Michael Osterlink was, begging me to read it. We're heading to Sparta in September to hike the trail that Leonidas took with his 300 Spartans to go beat the Persians. Now, your book is The Road to Sparta, which was about that same battle for Western civilization and about the beginning of the marathon. Tell us about that event and about the book first. I don't get into this till later, but it's so interesting. I thought it'd be a great place to start and like why you did that and what that was like.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating story, and I'm really excited to hear you're doing what you're doing. But the story is with the Battle of Marathon, which is one of the most one of the first recorded actual military conflicts.
Right.
And what happened in 490 BCE is the Persians invaded Greece, and they landed at a place called Bay of Marathon. Okay. And from there, they were going to attack Athens. Athens was badly outnumbered, and they realized they needed to recruit some might. And as you know, who was the most badass military force in ancient Greek?
The SEALs. Oh, no, wait, the Spartans.
Yeah, bring in the SEALs. So they dispatched this guy to run to Sparta from Athens. And, you'll see some of the terrain that entails. It's 153 miles in rocky, hot southern Mediterranean, territory. And so this guy, Phidippides ran to Sparta to recruit the Spartans, and eventually ran back to Marathon. And then somehow the Athenians overthrew the Persians, and then he ran up to the Acropolis, and he proclaimed Nike, Nike, or Nike, Nike, which means victory, victory, we are victorious. And then, of course, he died.
No way. So, his nutrition was probably a little off or something. So wait, did the Spartans run back with him? Or do they have to get their shit together?
No. Here's the ironic thing. He got to Sparta, and the Spartans, they were very religious, as you know, and they stuck to their beliefs, and they were not allowed to leave for battle until the moon was full, and it was 6 days until there was a full moon. So they told the Phidippides, this Athenian, we'll be coming to battle, but we can't dispatch for 6 days. So the Spartans never got. By the time the Spartans did get there, the Persians had already been defeated. But as you mentioned in your introduction, that was a temporary setback for the Persians. 10 years later, they resumed their battle against Greece, and this time it was a land force that came across, and there was the famous conflict at Thermopylae, and you'll see that firsthand where this took place, this melee. Well, you'll see kind of where it took place. It's right now where it took place is no longer there because it's kind of underwater 2,500 years later, but it's a close proximity to where that famous battle took place.
Yeah, they call it the Hot Gates. So can you still see kind of that channel where they channeled the Persians into those Hot Gates, or is that kind of gone?
Oh, you can see the past where they channeled them. Yep,
You can.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
Thermopylae, you therma, and there's a lot of therma in Greece, as you'll see, especially southern Greece. And these are
Hmm.
basically places where they're mineral ponds, where hot water
Mm,
bubbles up, from the earth,
hmm.
and they're therapeutic as well.
I
So
bet.
that's where the name Thermopylae came from, is the hot gates. There was a lot of hot water in the area.
So you're Greek, obviously, with that name, and so you probably had some familiarity with this, the culture and this battle. But what truly inspired you to go run the 150 some odd miles, from Marathon to Sparta to retrace those steps? What was your
One, I
why?
wanted to put my head at, where these ancient Greeks were. I mean, these were very sophisticated endurance athletes, and this is
Right.
2,500 years ago. And I wanted to learn more about their training and their mindset, and how they could possibly, do something that long ago that many modern ultramarathoners struggle to achieve today.
Right.
And so I threw myself into it, and I figured, the only way to really experience it is to go do it and to use the ancient food. So I recreated this race, this 153-mile foot race, from Athens to Sparta, and I only ate figs and olives,
Mm.
cured
S-
meat, so like a beef
With,
jerky.
and
Yeah,
did
and
you
the stuff.
find this stuff along the way, or like the runner might have, or did you bring it with you, or how did you work the logistics?
Yeah, when I did some of my training runs, I did some foraging. So I
Mm.
definitely foraged, but during the run itself, I kind of packed this stuff with me, like
Right.
a hip pack. But I only drank water as well. I didn't drink any sort of electrolyte replenishment beverage.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, it adds a whole new meaning to to running 153 miles when you're relying on these types of foods.
Yeah.
And
How did you get your salt intake?
yeah, the cured meat is very salty, and they would salt
Oh,
it. So it's
really?
it's essentially a beef jerky, if you imagine that. And if
Right.
you probably eat beef jerky, it's really salty. The
Hmm.
sodium content's really, really high. So I was eating that. But the other thing is that because I'm from that region, I don't sweat much. So I don't have
Hmm.
such a tough time with my electrolytes because I don't perspire that much.
Interesting. And the other question about this, is was there any record of actually how this guy or other, ultra runners from 2,500 years ago actually ate and trained? And do you know, like, did he just run nonstop, or did he sleep at night and, for a couple hours, or where did you find your information?
Yeah, so I worked with a guy named Professor Paul Cartledge, who's the foremost authority on ancient Greek culture, and he's from Cambridge University.
Hmm.
So an incredible mind. I mean, I can't tell you, he's like a walking Wikipedia.
That's awesome.
Amazing man. And he pointed me toward the historical records from a guy named Herodotus,
Right.
who's the father of
Yeah.
history.
Right.
And we called through Herodotus looking for specific references to what they call Humoral Dromi, which was a class of citizens that essentially were, Humoral Dromi means all day runner. So these
Wow.
were ultra marathoners that was kind of the Greek strategic advantage, was that they could dispatch these foot messengers that could cover terrain faster than horses. So if they
Wow.
needed to, get intelligence to other city states like Sparta or
Hmm.
Corinth, or if they needed to disseminate information, they would send out these foot messengers. It was kind of like a faster internet.
Right. That's
Yeah.
cool.
So we learned about how these guys trained. We learned about the foods they ate. We learned about their culture and their mind. Their mindset. I mean, these things are, half physical, but it's half mental as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we'll get into the mindset later because that kind of dovetails into one of the core tenets of this podcast. But let's kind of back up and like go back to your early life. Where did you grow up, and what was childhood like, and how did you find a passion for running back then?
Yeah. So I was actually born in L.A.
Okay.
Obviously both my parents are Greek, and I remember running home from kindergarten when I was 6 years old. So that was kind of my earliest recollection of running.
Hmm.
I couldn't sit still in class.
So was that just to get away from school? It was your mom on your way to pick you up or something, and you she passed you as you were sprinting home? Or
Yeah,
or did
no,
you tell your
it
parents,
was.
I'm running home from now on? And they're like,
Yeah, no,
okay.
that's exactly how it happened. I was the oldest of three, And when we had my sister, the youngest child, my mom was having a hard time getting me home from school. My dad was working two jobs. So I just said, Mom, you don't have to worry about getting me home. And she said, well, how are you going to get home? And I said, well, I'm just going to run.
That's
And she
awesome.
thought I was crazy, but I just started running home. And I found that it was kind of my way of relating to the world is just running.
Hmm.
I hated sitting still in a classroom.
Hmm.
And, to me, education took place as I was running. I felt all the things a runner feels. I saw that, the leaves change colors, the seasons change. I felt the differences of temperature on my skin, all those sort of things that a runner experiences. I
Hmm.
took in at 6 years old. And then I moved to San Clemente, so not far from you, for
Hmm.
high school. I ran competitively in high school as a freshman on our cross country team. And then I stopped running when I was 15 years old. Didn't run for 15 years. And
Whoa.
on the night of my 30th birthday, yeah, then I moved to San Francisco. So I went through, college. I went through graduate school. I went and got a business degree. And on the night of my 30th birthday, I'm in a bar in San Francisco, doing what we do on our 30th birthday. I'm drinking with my buddies. And at midnight, I said to these guys, "Hey, I'm leaving." And they said, "Hold it, where are you going? It's your 30th birthday. Let's have another round of tequila." I said, "No, I'm going to run 30 miles right now to
That's
celebrate
cool.
my 30th birthday." And they looked at me and they said, "Yeah, that's what they did." They laughed. They said, "You're not a runner. You're drunk."
That sounds
And I
like
said,
something
"Yeah,
a
I
Navy
am."
SEAL. That's exactly
Yeah,
what we would do in the SEAL team, but we usually wouldn't go run 30 miles. We'd go swim like 3 or 4 miles. But
yeah. I
that is
didn't know you
awesome
guys did that, but it's a great way to get out the door. So,
for
it was
sure.
great. I sobered up after 15 miles though, and I thought, what the hell am I doing? This is
I'm sure.
ridiculous.
Yeah, right. This is nuts. Now, I assume you had your running shoes on when you went out. You didn't just like run in your Dockers or
No,
something.
no, I wasn't a runner back then. I didn't even own running shoes. So I remember they were like gardening shoes. They were like Reebok tennis shoes. And I luckily I had these silk boxers on under my pants. I just took off my pants and started running in these silk underwear. I was so drunk,
That is awesome. Oh man, I'm sure you turned a few eyes. But
Yeah, no, I mean, I ended up running on this road to a place called Half Moon Bay. So I got out of the city pretty quickly, and
mhm.
yeah, I was out there all by myself. And like I said, at 15 miles, I sobered up, and I thought this is crazy, but it kind of just felt right. And I
Mhm.
was at a decision point where it was either like, what do you do? You don't have, you got to keep going. I mean, there's nothing out here, so just keep going. And I just ran straight through the night.
Yeah, you either turn around and run 15 miles back, or you just keep going, right?
Yeah, I had no choice.
And when you got there, what did you do? Call your friends and say, "Come pick me up."
Well, I'll never forget. This
Of
is
course, they were
I don't want to
hungover.
date myself. This is before cell phones, so
Oh
I
yeah.
got to essentially Half Moon Bay is kind of like the North County. I mean,
Right.
there's Highway One. So at Highway One, there was this 7-Eleven with a payphone out in front. So I called my wife, collect, and she picked up the phone. I woke her up. She said, you didn't come home. You've never not come home before. I mean, is everything okay? And I said, yeah, everything's fine. I just need a ride back to the house. And she said, no questions asked. I'll come get you. Where are you at? And I said, well, I'm out in front of 7-Eleven. And she said, like the 7-Eleven down on Geary Street. There's a 7-Eleven about a mile from our house. I'm like, no, the 7-Eleven in Half Moon Bay. And she said, what? How did you get there? And I said, I ran. She said, you ran from where? I said, I walked out of the bar at midnight and ran to Half Moon Bay. And she said, you know what? You don't sound very stable. Just hold tight and I'll be right there.
She's gonna take you to the padded room.
Yeah.
Oh
So
my
she came and
gosh,
schlepped me home. Yeah.
that's a really cool story. So you were hooked after that, I imagine. And
Yeah. No, the story goes, I started running and I thought I was, like this beast of a runner. Like, wow, I just ran 30 miles and I was running like 5 or 6 miles a day. And then there was this one path I took to get back to my house. It was up this hill, this really steep hill called Lover's Lane that has some military history. It's where
mhm,
the guys stationed in the Presidio used to walk up this steep hill into downtown San Francisco.
mhm,
And they'd walk, if they got lucky, they'd walk home with a woman. And so it was Lover's
mhm,
Lane. But I'm running up this steep hill, and these two guys pass me. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, no one passes me. And I thought I couldn't keep up with these guys. And they got to the top, and they're running with backpacks on as well. And
nice.
they start doing push-ups. I'm like, who the heck are these guys? Well, it ends up they were two Army Rangers,
Mhm.
and they were training for a 50-mile foot race, they told me.
Nice.
And I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I thought, hold it, 50 miles, like, where are the stops along the way? How many days does it take? Do you stay in tents or hotels? And the guy just looked at me, he's like, buddy, the gun goes off and you run. When you get to the finish line, you stop. And I just thought, hold it, a human being is incapable of running 50 miles. So I went and did some research on this race and found out where it was. It was outside of Sacramento, and thought, I got to try this. And that was kind of how I got into ultra marathoning.
That's super cool. And now, since you've like sought out pretty extreme challenges. You've run through Death Valley and you've run down in the South Pole. Tell us about what it's like to run 50 or more miles in those extreme temperatures. It's one thing just to get out and do that when the weather's nice, but it's another thing to do in 120-degree weather or below zero.
Yeah, well, I imagine some of your listeners probably have heard of this race called the Badwater Ultra Marathon.
Oh yeah, I've
And
got some friends who've run that.
you probably have friends who've done
Yeah,
it.
no,
Yeah, no
no
doubt.
doubt.
Yeah. But but like Badwater is the lowest place in the Western Hemisphere. It's right in the middle of the Death Valley, and it's also the hottest place on Earth. So the hottest recorded temperature ever, it was close to 135 Fahrenheit, was recorded in Badwater. And this, from this lowest point, the highest point is Mount Whitney, which
Right.
is the lowest, highest point in the contiguous U.S. So the idea is to run 135 miles nonstop from the lowest point to the highest point across Death Valley. And of course, the race is in July, the middle of summer, where it gets pretty hot.
Yeah.
So what is it like? It's otherworldly. It's a place that is about as far away from being on planet Earth as you can get, but still be on planet Earth. When it's 110 degrees, it's hot. When it's 115, it's hot. When it's 125, it's a whole nother level of just psychotic heat where weird things start happening. Plastic starts melting, your shoes start melting. And, it is such an intimidating event. The first time I tried it, I'll never forget getting out of the car in 125-degree temperature, and it owns you. It so takes you over, and you're so paralyzed with fear and like, how am I going to do this? This
Right.
is ungodly. I mean, you can't breathe. It's suffocating. Your eyeballs dry out. I mean, everything is different. And to me, it was just the ultimate test of physicality as well as mental toughness. Like, can you get yourself through this, and how?
Do you have to acclimatize, or do you literally just go there, get out of the car, and 3, 2, 1, go?
No, I do all sorts of specialized training. I run around here in where I live in Marin County, just north of San Francisco. I run around in my North Face, ski parkas in the middle of summer. On hot days, I run through the middle of the day, wearing a big ski jacket. I go into the sauna at the gym and do sets of push-ups and sit-ups.
Mm-hmm.
So you try your best to heat acclimate.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, it's really hard to replicate what it feels like when it's that hot, because you've got to run in it.
Right.
And weird things happen. I mean, the roof of your mouth, the soft palate in the roof of your mouth can get sunburned if you're panting too much because the reflective UV off the asphalt. So you got to remember to keep your mouth closed. Things. I mean, the epithelia in your sinuses starts sloughing off because it's so dried out. Your eyeballs burn. I mean, there's just all kinds of miseries that are thrown at you. You've got to overcome.
God, so how long or how much of the 135 miles is in Death Valley in that kind of unbearable heat?
You get out of Death Valley after about 45 miles.
Okay.
But, it goes from being 125 to being 115.
Big relief.
Yeah. I'll never forget the one time I was running this race in the middle of the night. It's 2 a.m. The low temperature was 114 degrees. I mean, that was the chill of the night, 114.
Right. And do you have a support crew, or are you all alone when you do these things?
Yeah, no, you have a support vehicle, and it kind of piggybacks, up the road every few miles to provide support.
Mm-hmm.
So
you run that becomes your micro goal. Just get to the vehicle, kind of thing.
Get to the vehicle. Yep.
Yeah.
And it's a goal, but also it's a curse because you've got a car that can pull over on the side of the road, and you can get to it pretty easily. And when you're miserable, what do you want? You want comfort.
You can also get inside of it. Yeah.
Yeah, you just want to get inside an air-conditioned vehicle. So a lot of times when I'm really hurting, I tell my crew, go 10 miles up the road. And they're like, you're
Uh-huh.
dying. You'll never make it 10 miles. I'm like, go 10 miles up the road.
Yeah. And
And you just,
when you see me, start driving. Don't let me in. That's fantastic in a really sick kind of way. Wow. I'm just trying to visualize that.
well, I encourage you, if you ever get a chance, just to go out there and experience it in the summer. I mean, just go to a place called Stovepipe Wells,
Yeah.
or go to Furnace Creek in the middle of summer and just get out of the car and run a mile and just
Yeah,
experience
I'm
it.
just wondering if I could do it, but I think I probably should start with a shorter race. I've done marathon, maybe like a 50 miler before I try the Death
Yeah,
Valley.
no, the bad. I mean, the Badwater. It's really hard to get into the event.
Is
They
it?
accept. Yeah, you got to submit a resume, and they like accept 75 people, and these are
Okay.
some of the toughest guys from around the world.
Yeah.
I could see
Well,
you
hey,
doing it, but
hey, wait,
it
I'm
would.
supposed to be in that category. I haven't applied yet. I have to work on that. That's cool. So let me ask you another question. You said earlier something that kind of caught my attention that you don't sweat very much because of where you grew up in Greece. So what's up with that? Like, why do Greeks not sweat very much?
Well, one, because the more you sweat, the higher the probability that you're gonna throw your electrolytes out of balance. So it's typical of people from hotter climates, warmer climates, to be very vascular. So,
Mm-hmm.
very good at shunting blood to the surface. So, like
Mm-hmm.
if you look at my arms or my legs, I mean, the capillaries, the veins, and everything, the arteries, especially when I get hot, just come to the surface. So I look very vascular. If you're a heavy sweater, you've got to replace, the sodium, the potassium, the magnesium, the chloride, and that becomes tricky business because
Mm-hmm.
it's easy, to take in too much as plain water versus too much
Mm-hmm.
electrolytes. So it's advantageous not to sweat that much.
Yeah. And I grew up in a cold climate, and genetically, I'm from like Viking territory, so I do sweat a lot, which would be a challenge for me. Huh?
Well, sweating it's a good thing for especially for shorter durations or so because it helps
Right.
your body cool. I mean, you get the
Mm-hmm.
evaporative cooling, but if you're talking about 10, 20, 30, 40 hours of sweating, then it becomes tricky business to maintain your
Mm-hmm.
electrolyte balance.
Now, I have to ask you this because my producer Allison made a note of this and she bolded it, saying that you have a condition which allows the body to rapidly flush lactic acid from your system before it builds up in your muscles. What's up with that?
Yeah, so I've been tested as a lot of elite level athletes have been tested, and every endurance athlete has the ability to buffer lactic acid. So you probably know what lactic acid is.
Mm-hmm.
It's the
Right.
byproduct of cellular respiration.
Mm-hmm.
And the quicker you can kind of clear that out of your system, the longer you can go. It's a limiting factor for endurance. But they found for some reason I have this unique ability to stave off the accumulation of lactic acid for periods where they've never kind of seen this before. And this is not a sprint. So I mean, if you look at
Mm-hmm.
me sprint like my VO2 max, for instance, which is kind of the capacity to get oxygen to your muscles when you're really giving an all out effort. It's high. It's in the mid 60s, which is pretty high, but it's not extraordinary by
Mm-hmm.
any means. But the
Yeah.
ability for me to, my lactic acid threshold, as they call it, is quite extraordinary, and I think that helps me. I don't ever cramp. I don't have a lot of problems that typically runners that are running those kind of durations
Mm-hmm.
really do.
Do you think that's a genetic thing, or is it because you've been running since you were in kindergarten?
It's both.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, every endurance athlete has they've got elevated lactic threshold. So
Mm-hmm.
you see this in any sort of marathoner or ultra marathoner or triathlete. But my mom's family comes from a place called Ikaria, an island in Greece. It's where Icarus, the kid
Mm-hmm.
with the wax wings, crashed. And Ikaria is one of the blue zones. I don't know if you know of the
Mm-hmm.
blue
Oh yeah,
zones.
the people who live
Yeah,
over
so
a
it's
hundred. Yeah.
Yep. So it has the highest concentration of centenarians anywhere
Wow.
on this island of Icaria. And I've been there and I've run with men and women that are over 100 years old. And they're like
No kidding.
mountain goats. I mean, they're incredible how they climb up hills. And if you look at their legs, and it's amazing. Yeah. So they think it might have something to do with my heritage coming from that island as well.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, the epigenetic effect of just being around that over the centuries gets passed down. So,
Yeah, it was funny. I mean, I'll tell you just a quick story. I mean, I was speaking to this woman, and she just had gotten back to the village. She was 104 years old, and she was very disappointed. And I was asking why she's disappointed. And she said, well, she's an entrepreneur and started a new business, and she had walked down to the bank. So she walked down from her village 3 miles down this really steep hill to the bank to get a loan. And the loan officer said, we're sorry, we have a policy. We don't loan money to people over 103. so, so she walked back to the village without a loan. She said, I'm just so disappointed. I walked all that way and I couldn't even get a loan.
what the heck? Oh man, I would have been inspired to loan it to her myself. Holy cow. That's really cool. Well, that'll have to change. Banking system. Well, that's a whole different subject, isn't it?
Well, and the tragic thing I think is, she is incredible, but the generations of Greeks that are younger are not quite as healthy, which is
Right.
unfortunate. Her offspring are not as healthy as she was. So that, I don't know. It's kind of that whole long life lineage is I think is going to be genetically diluted, in the future.
Well, hopefully, the work that you're doing and we're doing and others will start to inspire people toward, holistic health again. I mean, there's a lot of work in that area being done, but there's a lot of people out there to reach. That's for sure. I only publicly support companies and products that I personally use and have found valuable. So I wanted to tell you about Qualia. Now, I'm not a supplement geek. I don't find them useful if I'm fueling properly. But when it comes to my cognitive strength and brain health, I am excited about the emerging industry of nootropic supplements. I've been testing Qualia, designed by my friends at the Neurohacker Collective, for several months now, and it's on the bleeding edge of nootropic research and has become the one supplement that I won't go without on a daily basis. Qualia stimulates what's called broad spectrum cognitive enhancement, which involves optimizing multiple cognitive variables simultaneously rather than focusing on a single variable. For example, it brings me greater ability to focus and makes me feel more connected while not diminishing my overall awareness of the environment. I experience a systematic enhancement of my brain's ability to take in and process information without any stimulating effect, which would make me feel agitated like caffeine or depleted after the effect wears off. Now, for a busy entrepreneur and athlete like me, it's a no-brainer to invest in my brain health with Qualia. You can get on the Qualia bandwagon with me by visiting neurohacker.com. That's neurohacker.com and use the code UnbeatableMind15R. That's UnbeatableMind15R to get 15% off the life of your order. Trust me on this one, you won't be disappointed with Qualia. So let me ask about still on this topic of doing crazy things, because I think people want to know about crazy things and how you endured them. But this one particularly intrigued me. So running 50 marathons, 50 states in 50 consecutive days. It's not so much, I totally get that you can run 50 26-mile marathons, but doing it in 50 states in 50 days is a serious logistical challenge. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I just thought it would be kind of the ultimate road trip, if you will. Kind of around the world in 60 days, kind of, timestamp
That's like
this.
800 miles, isn't it, in 50 days?
Yeah, well,
That's
I mean,
crazy.
it's more, it's over 1,000 miles of running,
Oh,
but
is it?
as far as the travel goes, that was the toughest element is, the sleep deprivation and, you run a marathon, you don't want to sit in a bus for 8 hours,
Right.
driving to the next state. And that's inevitably what was happening. But there's also a very fascinating, I think, a business story that could be told about this event,
Mm-hmm.
because you're right, the logistics were daunting. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, I can't train for this thing and do all the planning. There's just too much. So I worked with this company called Hawkeye Sports and Entertainment,
Mm-hmm.
and they have done a lot of logistics, and they've helped like with the Olympic torch run across the country, and
Mm-hmm.
they're logistics experts. So they really did all of the mapping and so forth, and the routes to get me from state to state.
Mm-hmm. And so what was in it for them? Was there some corporate sponsorship or media around this? How do they
Yeah,
make
no,
money out of it?
that's a really good question. So I partnered with the North Face, and
Okay.
you know the North Face,
Sure.
and I structured this as an expedition. So I was a North Face athlete, and they had this formal expedition program where
Oh,
you
cool.
submit expedition proposals, and they'll fund it if they think it's worthy. Well,
Hmm.
traditional expeditions are what? Guys climbing Everest or some peak in Nepal. And I thought let's shift the paradigm a bit and view expeditions as being something adventurous, like running 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days. And they said, "Wow, that sounds great. We're behind it. We can't fund the whole thing,
Hmm.
but let's go out and see if we can get some other sponsors."
Hmm.
So we literally called. I think we made like 5 sales calls on 5 sponsors, and the first 5 sponsors all said, "Yes, sign me up." So
That's
Muscle
awesome.
Milk immediately on one conversation, sign me up. Toyota, sign me up.
Hmm.
Timex. It was incredible. Like these people thought it was just the greatest sort of endeavor ever. So we got these corporate sponsors. We eventually had to turn down corporate sponsors because we were kind of oversubscribed, and it wasn't really
Right.
set up to be, financially a profitable thing. It was just we just wanted to cover our costs.
Right.
But that said, it put a lot of pressure on me because I thought, suppose I die after 5 marathons. I mean, I didn't know if I could do it, and I thought now we have all these people, have thrown in a lot of money to kind of back this thing, and there's a little pressure to keep going. So it was it
Yeah.
was it was interesting.
I mean, it's ironic because if you had died, the pressure would have been completely off.
Well, it's funny
But
because
we're
the
happy
North
you
Face
didn't, by the way.
the North Face I learned they took out an insurance policy on me.
No way.
Yeah, like a liability insurance, like
That's
they could get back
a
all the
lot
money if I died. I'm like, hey guys, hold it here.
of. That's really funny. Oh my gosh. So, did you have to like drink muscle milk and drive around in the Toyota and wear a Timex?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm loyal to those brands. I'm a
Mhm.
loyalist by nature, and and they stepped up to support me. So I thought, you know what, I'm supporting these guys, and I
Right.
like their products. I mean,
Right.
when we looked at who do we go after as sponsors, I kind of said, okay, what products do I currently use and believe
Hmm.
in,
Hmm.
and that's kind of how we chose our sponsor, our sales list, if you will.
That's cool. We're in some early discussions with Timex about doing a watch based upon kind of the seal fit functional training model. A good company. So,
Yeah, I mean the people I was working with, I don't think are there any longer, but
mhm.
yeah, they were great to work with. They were
Yeah.
really supportive.
So since we brought up muscle milk, can you talk about how you fuel yourself when you train for and do one of these events? And I know you have one of your degrees, your undergraduate was in fueling science or nutrition science. So let's talk about nutrition for a bit. Nutrition for extreme endurance.
Yeah, it's you're right. I mean, I studied food science in graduate
Food.
school, and
Okay.
food technology is a really interesting field. And
Mhm.
I've kind of gone from trying to engineer food to relying more on simple foods. So
Mhm.
kind of going full circle where now I look, especially when I'm training. So my daily meals when I'm training are really, it's kind of a hybrid between a paleo diet, Mediterranean, pescatarian. So I eat a lot of fish, primarily cold water fish. But if you can't pull it from a tree or dig it from the earth, or catch it with your hands, I pretty much don't eat it.
Yeah.
So nothing, no rice, nothing has to be processed. No,
Hmm.
I don't eat any sort of grains that have to be, refined and
Hmm.
tooled and reconstituted to eat them.
Okay. That sounds a lot like what we recommend, except for practical purposes, I recommend the 80-20 rule. So 20% of the time, don't worry about it. That's when to have rice and grains. But try to 80% of the time eat basically exactly what you said, paleo whole food close to the earth. So that
Yeah,
works. I
it's
was curious though about that for ultra runners. Do you have any problems with your glycemic index? I mean, how do you get enough carbohydrates and sugar into your system? Or are you in a total ketogenic state when you run and train?
I would say half the time I'm in the ketogenic state. So I love nut butter.
Mm, yeah.
So and this is without honey. So packets of I really like cashew nut butter, tahini, which is sesame seed nut butter,
Mm,
hazelnut butter, which puts you, as you know, in a ketogenic state.
hmm.
The other thing that I do though, when I'm during my training diet, I eat a ton of fruit, primarily organic fruit,
Okay.
and which is kind of counterintuitive because people think, oh, there's all this sugar in fruit.
Hmm.
I'll tell you what, I don't have any sort of glycemic response to a lot of fruit.
Right.
And this, again, I'm eating the skin on the fruit, whole fruit. I mean,
Hmm.
if you saw the way I eat an apple, you would say, wow, you eat the stem, you eat the seeds, you eat the whole
Hmm.
apple. Yes, I
Hmm.
eat the whole apple. There's a lot of fiber in the apple. It slows
Hmm.
down the absorption, of
Hmm.
sugar.
Hmm.
So I finger prick myself and look at my blood sugar levels. I don't have any sort of response. I could eat 5 apples and my blood sugar barely budges.
That's interesting. Huh. So yeah, I'm going to have to look into that because I've kind of, I like fruit, but I veer away from eating a ton of it for that reason because I was also fed that kind of story that it had a glycemic impact, and but maybe it doesn't, right? If you eat the whole thing, I like that.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a guy named Michael Arnstein. I don't know if you ever had him on, but he's a
No.
fruitarian.
Okay.
He'd be a fascinating guest because he defies science. I mean, I
Does
know
he?
Michael pretty well. And all he eats is fruit. And
Is that right?
I thought he was shitting me at first. I'm like, you got to be kidding, because he's fit. I mean, the guy
Right.
is ripped. He's bulky. I mean, he's got good muscle mass, and
Hmm.
he only eats fruit. And I said, okay, I want to see your iron levels. If you ever a blood test done, like your iron
Hmm.
levels are going to be horrible. No, he's got normal. His RBCs are normal. Everything. His hemoglobin is normal. He's got bulk, so he's not skinny. I'm like, where are you getting the protein from? It's counterintuitive, right? He's getting zero
Yeah, it's
protein.
very like I don't see where you get protein or fat unless he's supplementing.
Yeah,
That's
that's
wild.
exactly right. Now, he said, well, I eat tomatoes, and tomatoes have 10% protein. I'm like, Michael, come on, I'm a food chemist. They don't have a complete protein. I mean, where are you getting protein from? Complete protein. But he's been doing this for years.
Interesting.
And his his hemoglobin A1C is just really stable.
Huh. It's almost like a breatharian, although I haven't met any breatharians, and I think if there are any out there, I doubt they're very healthy. Um, that's a whole different subject. I'd like to find a breatharian to interview, by the way, also.
Well, I mean,
We're,
I do a lot of intermittent fasting, and I've been doing that for
sure.
years. The old Greeks used to call it an apostles' fast,
Hmm.
and they did it primarily for religious reasons. But
What's the longest one you've done?
I typically don't go for more than 24 hours,
Okay.
so I
Yeah.
don't do these really prolonged fasts.
I met a guy who was really into this kind of breatharian thing, and he said was working toward it, which was kind of interesting. But he said he does 7-day dry fasts. It just doesn't sound healthy to me at all to even try
And
that.
does he? Well, let me ask you this. This is really weird. Does he drink his own urine?
I that's a really good question.
Yeah, because I've
Maybe he
heard it.
does.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
I
creepy.
don't know.
All right, moving on.
I'm disciplined. I'm disciplined. I'm not that disciplined. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm with you on that. I could probably go with the fruitarian
I'm
approach.
not on a raft floating in the Pacific. Yeah, I'm not going to drink my pee.
Right. We're not in survival mode. Let's talk about the mental part. So that we talk about the big four skills that can really keep you focused and on track during really intense times. And so at SealFit, what we do, and in Unbeatable Mind, actually, we try to train these in normal times so that they're there for you to use intentionally, as opposed to finding them after you quit, or
Yeah, no,
when
I just call that artificial trials.
right,
But yeah,
exactly. So we
yeah.
set up these trials and we practice these, both in daily practice and through these trials. And the four skills are breath control, obviously managing your internal dialogue, being able to amplify your imagery so that you have a couple things. One, you have a clear vision of what you're doing, and you can see the victory in it. And two, you might, let's say, have an image team, running alongside you or something like that. And then the last one is micro goals, which we've already addressed, just breaking it down into little tiny bite-sized chunks. Do you have a system like that, or do those kind of resonate with you? What are the tools that you use to stay in the fight?
Everything you just said completely resonates with me. The other thing that I really practice is, now it's kind of vogue to use this term, or it's almost cliche to use the term mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
But I've just noticed that I've been practicing mindfulness for years, because when the going gets really tough, what I tend to do is to, just basically black out everything except the current moment of time. So say I'm
Nice.
doing a 100-mile foot race and I'm at mile 70 and I'm dying and feel like I can't make it another 100 feet. I've got 30 more miles. How am I going to do this?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of thinking that way, I just completely put out of my mind the thought of the finish line.
Mm-hmm.
and I don't reflect on the past. I just focus on taking one step to the best of my ability.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about a micro goal. I'm talking about take one step to the best of my ability. Okay, take
Mm-hmm.
your next step to the best of your ability.
Mm-hmm.
Literally get that granular where you've got the blinders on to everything except the here and now and just being the best that you can be in that instant of time. And you can put yourself into almost like a Zen-like state
Sure.
where
Totally.
you can do this for hours and hours, and your time kind of, I don't know, the whole perception of time gets warped
Right.
because you're not thinking about anything but right now. And so you're not thinking, wow, this is insane. I've got to do this for 5 hours. That sort of thought doesn't even cross your mind. You're just thinking about next step, next
Right.
step.
Now, is that your mantra, or do you have some sort of dialogue that goes along that to help keep you focused on just that next step?
Sometimes I say, I kind of repeat that next step, just
Mm-hmm.
next step,
Mm-hmm.
next step.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I've experienced what you're talking about many, many, many times in our Kokoro camp, which I would love to invite you to, by the way. And you would really just knock it out of the park. But it's a 50-hour nonstop event. But instead of running, you're rucking and you're in the ocean, and it's all about the team. But you don't get any sleep. You just keep going. So you're kind of used to that kind of stuff, but most of the athletes aren't. But reports are that people right around between hours 30 and 50, they begin to experience these moments where they're in a flow state for 3 or 4 hours, and they might like fall out of it, but they get right back into it. And so we've been kind of studying that, and what is that, and how do you activate flow on demand, and how do you train for it? And because it'll happen to you if the conditions are right. But our premise is that you can train for it, and obviously through your training, you kind of found that naturally. So I imagine that when you start a run, you can pretty quickly get into this state. You don't have to wait 70 miles, right?
No, I mean, it was, I've got to say that group dynamics add a whole nother element. So I'm pretty
Right.
good at putting myself in this place, just
Mm-hmm.
kind of, on a finger snap.
Mm-hmm.
But I've done adventure racing, multi-day adventure
Mm-hmm.
races with a group. And that's a different sort of challenge
Yeah.
because you've got human dynamics that are playing in. And to me, it's a
Right.
little bit harder to put your head in that place versus, running solo ultra marathon.
That's true. And what we experience and train for in the SEALs is for that team to find that extended flow state. And it takes a lot of training, though. That's pretty interesting. What about this notion of like a higher sense of purpose, like why you're doing things? Does that come into play for you? Like when you really hit the wall and you hit the mile 70, it's one thing to just be mindful of the next step. It's another thing to remind yourself why you're doing it. So what's your why?
To me, there doesn't have to be a why. I think it
Mm,
was Amelia Earhart had a great quote. She said, adventure is worthwhile in its own right.
mm.
And even Thoreau said, I think he said something like, make trials, attempt them, there is nothing else. It
So
can be the highest, it
yeah,
can be the
yeah.
highest calling just to pursue excellence in the endeavor that, you're most passionate about.
So succeeding at the experience, the challenge, the adventure, that's the why.
That's the exact why. Yeah. And again, I mean, we
Amazing.
get back to this idea of artificial trials. I mean, mankind almost has the urge to battle, if you will.
Hmm.
And I mean, we've been warring ever since we've been a species. And the ultra marathon is basically a war against yourself, which I like. I mean, you're not trying to, the enemy is yourself
Right. Well,
or the
isn't that
elements.
a beautiful metaphor? Because if you can beat yourself, right? If you can defeat your ego, then you have no need to fight someone else, right? Unless of course, they're trying to kill you. But
Yeah, I mean that whole thing to me is I just don't see anything artificial about it because even war you could argue that war is an artificial trial. I mean it's
hmm.
why do we have to war? I mean it's basically egos involved
Hmm.
and
Right.
it is an ego involved to sign up for an Ironman. It's the same sort
Hmm.
of thing.
Interesting. Let's talk about. We got to wrap up soon here because I know we both got other stuff to do.
I
We
gotta
can
go.
talk.
I gotta go running. I haven't got my
Yeah,
daily run in yet.
you got 50 miles in front of you.
So.
What about your philanthropic? What's your how are you seeking to serve and to give back these days? I know that's really important to you, as it is for us.
Yeah, so I started a foundation called Carno Kids. No one can pronounce my last name, so they always truncate it from Karnazes just to
Hmm.
Carno. And
Hmm.
the goal of Carno Kids is to inspire, motivate, and energize kids to get outdoors and get active.
Great.
And we're kind of a passive organization, and I do fundraising and organizations that apply for grants.
I
We have a
see.
board
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kind of goes through them. So there's a group called Girls on the Run, which
Hmm.
has been a beneficiary of ours. Girls on the Run basically takes inner city at-risk youth girls and puts them through a 10-week running program to run a 5K.
Nice.
And it really transforms lives. Kids on Trails, which is an organization that gets inner city youth out onto trails. So we have also 14 actual 1K races across the country, the Carno Kids 1K, and they're affiliated with the North Face.
Hmm.
So these sort of activities focused on getting kids outside and active are very important to me because I mean let's face it, that's our future.
Right.
And it's harder to influence someone that's older, as you know. We get kind of set in our ways,
Hmm.
but kids are very malleable. And
Hmm.
I've been doing this now for nearly 20 years, and I have kids that I've changed their lives,
Right.
and and they're great athletes. I mean, they've gone on from being just kind of no direction in life to wow, I'm passionate about running, and I'm going to try
Hmm.
an ultra marathon.
No, that's fantastic. And what is your vision for the future? Are you an optimist and abundant type person when you look forward, or do you see some challenges ahead, or both?
No, I travel enough to realize that the world is not as fucked up as we all think it is.
Hmm. Yeah, good for you.
I mean, if you sit there and watch CNN all day, you'd think that we're in such turmoil. But I mean,
Hmm.
I was just in Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan,
Hmm.
and they're asking me, wow, aren't you afraid living in America? I mean, everyone hates each other. The police are killing people and the black people are rebelling. And I'm like, that's what they said. I mean, they said it's got to
What
be
great
terrifying living in
perspective.
America. And I'm in Uzbekistan, which is right above Afghanistan, thinking, wow, yeah, this is a funny world we live in.
That is a funny world. Fascinating. All right. So your book is called The Road to Sparta. Am I right? Did I get the title right there?
That's the most recent book. Yep.
Okay. And what else have you written? Something
Yeah,
about
I've written
running,
four
I bet.
books. Yeah,
Okay.
one was my first one was it's called Ultra Marathon Man: Confessions of an All Night Runner,
Nice.
and that's still been my most popular book. So
Hmm.
if you're looking at kind of an introduction into who I am, what I do, I think that's the most popular.
Okay.
When are you taking off for Greece?
We're heading over there like September 8th, I think, or something like that. Second week of
Nice.
September.
You're gonna feel some heat.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So for me, should I read The Road to Sparta, or since I'm going to be putting in about 300 kilometers, but we're rucking, so that'll be a fast walk with load.
Yeah,
Which
I
book?
think I think the Road to Sparta. I think you'd be fascinated with the Road to Sparta.
Okay, so we'll get that, The Road to Sparta. And all these are available on Amazon. Where can people find out about you personally, like on social media or your
You
website?
know, I'll just revert to my website. It's just ultramarathonman.com.
Okay,
But
Ultra
I'm
Marathon.
at on Facebook and all these other things. I've got a couple 100,000 followers,
Okay,
so I'm not
awesome.
hard to find if you're
Yeah,
interested.
yeah. No,
And
a
of
lot
course you
of
could just
people. A
come
lot.
up to Marin and run a couple 100 miles with me, and we'll get to know each other real well.
I might just do that. It'll be my introduction to ultra running. Oh my gosh. So yeah, because a lot of the listeners are training for something. Because part of our gestalt is get off your ass and go do something really challenging. And so Kokoro Camp is one of the pinnacles. That's the 50-hour thing I described. That's our event, but we also push people toward Go Ruck and Spartan Challenge and stuff like that, or just to go out and do stuff like you do. So a lot of my coaches have run 50-mile races, and so we definitely dabble in this area, some more than others, but it's an area that I haven't done much of myself. I've gone kind of the other direction, and I do like a lot of functional training with weights, and I ocean swim quite a bit, and I do run swim runs where I'll do a mile run and a mile swim and a mile run, stuff like that, which is my classic SEAL stuff, the way I trained. But I'm not
I think
against
I think I mean
walking
I
more.
think that's really I think it's great you do that because that's what you're passionate about. But I also think it's great to try new challenges where you're an amateur and you get your ass
Right.
kicked.
I completely
And
agree, and it actually scares me. So there you go. I'm not afraid of many things. It's really funny. I just took a friend out ocean swimming the other day, and they were terrified. And they're like, "Man, this is not something I'm used to. I'm way out of my comfort zone." And then they asked me, what is it that you're afraid of?" And now I know, right? I couldn't come up with an answer. I'm like, I'm not afraid of jumping on airplanes. I'm not afraid of much. I'm not afraid of getting shot at, but I am a little afraid of running 50 miles straight.
yeah, well,
So
that's all the reason just find a 50 miler and it's so easy to
just
just
go.
press that button where it says registered now. You just hit that button and I mean, I know you. I can already sense you already. Once there's a race on your calendar 3 months down the road, you're going to
Oh, you're
start
doing it.
training. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna
Being
do
fear is
this
a
when
great
I do this.
motivator. I mean, you're fearful of it, you're going to train harder.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very cool. All right. That was awesome, Dean. Thanks so much for your time. You rock. I really hope to meet you in person someday soon, maybe on the trail somewhere. But if not, then maybe our summit or some SealFit event. My invitation for you to come to Kokoro or any of our training holds. So if you find yourself down here, or you want to do that.
Yeah, and no, you're a great interviewer. Thanks for having me on. And do me a favor, don't buy a book.
Okay.
Just check your mailbox.
All right, everyone. So let's thanks Dean and check out Ultra Marathon Man. Did I get that right, Dean?
Yeah, Ultra Marathon Man,
ultramarathonman.com.
Confessions of an All-Night Runner. Yep.
Yeah, so do check that out if you're interested in running and nutrition around endurance. And I know most of you are. Dean's the man, and we'll track his progress and support him and support his philanthropic effort, Carno Kids. That sounds fantastic. Maybe there's some way that our Courage Foundation can partner with them. So one more thing before I check out, I have a few sponsors for this podcast, but I rarely endorse a product. It makes me a little sketchy to endorse products. But one that I've decided to endorse because it works and it's really interesting and it's intriguing to me is the Halo, which is an electro stim thing. You put it on your head. It looks like a pair of headphones and it stimulates the movement area of your brain. And it has a demonstrated neuroplastic effect to improve whatever it is that you want to improve that you're going to be moving with. So if you're CrossFitter to improve and you want to use it before you deadlift, it'll improve your deadlift. You'll actually be able to lift more weight. And if you're going to do any functional exercise, or I imagine it would work with running, it'll actually work. We had a lively conversation with the founder. It would probably work with visualization, although it's very hard to test. So anyways, it's called the Halo, and they're offering you $125 off the Halo Sport thing if you want to give it a try. It's not that expensive. It's super cool. So go to haloneuro.com, haloneuro.com. And if you do decide to buy it, use the promo code UnbeatableMind125, UnbeatableMind125. All right, that's it, folks. Thanks for letting me do that plug. Thanks for listening to Dean and I chat. And thanks for pursuing that unbeatable mind and being different, being uncommon, and challenging yourself, and also leading by example. We really appreciate it. The world needs you. Hoo-yah. Divine out. Hey, this is Mark Divine. Thanks very much for watching the Unbeatable Mind podcast on YouTube. You can also find the podcast at iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, and unbeatablemind.com/podcast. Be sure to check out the new episode released every week. Hoo-yah.